All right. Good evening, everybody. Dr. Lisle, how are you doing this evening?
Good. All is well.
Excellent. Well, we had, again, last week, great questions. This week, even more questions. We've had some students, some medical students, some psychology students, some listeners from all over the world sending us some really, really fantastic questions, good thinking, and really, really interesting scenarios. So today we're going to go over a couple of those questions right after we talk about some evolutionary psychology news. So this week in Evolutionary Psychology News, the journal, there's two articles that I read about. The first one was how do husbands react to their wives rejecting sex, and it turns out that the results that they experimented on this. And they were trying to decide what is it that predicts their husband's anger when they get rejected sexually from their wives, and it turns out that they did a lot of different surveys with I think it was about 50 to 100 husbands. And the results showed that the time that their wives spend with their male friends is actually predicts their husband's anger, upset, and frustration. But the time that the wives spend with their male coworkers does not. So it turns out that the male friends are the ones that are going to be predicting this rather than male coworkers.
Oh, let me get this straight. So the results show that the amount of time that wives spend with their male friends but not coworkers predict. So my understanding is what I think I'm hearing is if the wives are spending time with male friends, that upsets their husbands. But if they're spending time with male coworkers, it doesn't. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That obviously makes perfect sense from the standpoint of that spending time with male coworkers is being essentially put upon. There's a secondary reason why it is that if the wives are spending time with males that are quote friends, then there is something brewing there that's potentially untoward, obviously, and so this indicates that what's happening is that there's an indication of either cuckoldry or potential defection that's going on, and that the signal is louder when it's a male friend than when it's a male coworker. So it's just basically indicating that there's fewer innocent reasons and more statistical probability of trouble, and therefore that's how the little causality, the little inference making system is being triggered more. Simple, makes sense.
All right.
God,
so
kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So suggestions for wives would be if they're going to be rejecting their husbands sexually, to not spend as much time with their male friends.
Yeah, that's the prescription that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So our next article is this is actually nothing new. This is just this is nothing new. This is just we're getting a little bit of audio from the other side, Dr. Lisle.
Yeah, I'm here. Are you still there?
Yep. We're just getting some background. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
So this is nothing new. They were just hoping to confirm previous studies, previous information, and what they found was that people who responded to these surveys were people who are more willing to invest in their own biological children than in other related children, nieces and nephews, and also compared to stepchildren and friends' children. And this is just directly related to how related they are. So I've heard you talk about this in terms of Hamilton's law. And it's not just for humans. It seems like this is true for all animals in the animal kingdom. The only thing that was interesting to me that I had always a question was what about personality characteristics? So, for instance, if I have a non-related a friend in the family that just very agreeable, conscientious, we get along very well, but then I've got someone who's I'm related to, but they're extremely disagreeable, not very intelligent, just not a very good friend. Will I feel more emotionally close to them? And they, in fact, found that this was true, that the association was partially mediated by emotional closeness as well.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. If you just sort of think this through, the right way to think of these things is how much you like, or essentially how you feel, is nothing other than essentially a mathematical calculation, or it's the result of a mathematical calculation about some input into the nervous system, calculating the profit or loss of a given stimulation of any kind with respect to your gene survival probability. So a really great friend, et cetera, is valuable for that reason, and a brother who's a real jerk still carries an awful lot of potential value to you, just because, since he's your brother, when the chips are down, if you're in trouble dying in quicksand and he could help you, he's more likely to go to more trouble than certainly a non-related member of the tribe. However, the question is he more likely to put himself out than your best friend who's a great guy? Answer, interesting. We're going to find that all of this is these are the tricky problems that evolution had to figure out, and so we're going to find that our estimates of these things are is a mixed bag of what we're going to call relatedness coefficients versus how strong is the emotional closeness of a friendship. So yeah, just simple, interesting calculus. The more general principle is that all values about everything are all in relation to other values, and so your mind is running some pretty sophisticated calculus. Literally, it's how much do I like this bite of chocolate versus how much worried about my waistline, and it'll make a difference about whether or not there's some attractive guy at work that some gal is interested in. If she's interested in the attractive gal at work, suddenly that chocolate's not worth it. But if she's not so interested in the guy at work, she was interested in him, and then she got close to him and found out he has bad breath. So now tonight she's going to go have a piece of chocolate.
That's why I had a piece of chocolate last night. You know me so well.
All right. Good enough.
And the night before and the night before. Okay, so. All right. So those are two kind of the studies. Let's go over some emails that our listeners. Again, great questions. I really want to thank Kate, Jeffrey, Robert, a couple other people who've been sending us some interesting information, Citric as well. Okay. So our first question, and this was one we didn't get to last week. Dear Dr. Lisle, is the concept of self-limiting beliefs the same as ego traps in evolutionary psychology? Why do these occur, and what is their function?
Interesting. I'm not exactly aware of the term self-limiting beliefs within academic psychology. This is certainly a concept in pop psychology, and so the notion is that you don't believe in yourself as much as essentially you underestimate your potential abilities, and therefore by underestimating it, you underestimate it then causes you to be less motivated to pursue something. So that's a self-limiting belief. Now, that is not the same thing as an ego trap. So self-limiting belief is the notion that you really have greater abilities than you somehow are aware of, and therefore you are not investing time and energy and effort in pursuing things that would be of greater value to pursue than the ones that you are pursuing, because of your essentially lack of confidence that you could compete at that level. Now, why do these occur? The reason that they occur is because your self is essentially what you experience as yourself is a repository of calibrations, and you are designed to calibrate as accurately as possible in order to utilize your time and energy competing for mates, friends, or trading partnerships of the best quality that you can. Best quality meaning essentially the best cost-benefit relationship with respect to gene survival that is possible for you to make the trade. Now, why would one underestimate that? Answer, just because you're making a mistake. And so a person could easily have misinformation about their abilities and happen to be underestimating those abilities. Very possible. Usually gets worked out. In other words, usually there is sufficient evidence. First of all, we usually are not asleep at the switch with respect to any of these kinds of competitions. So it's almost unheard of for someone to be, for example, extremely attractive and not know it. They are getting feedback from people. They're getting tremendous evidence about this. So it's unlikely that they don't know. It's unlikely that people don't know that they're really smart, for example. It's unlikely that someone who is well above average for smart doesn't know that they're above average. They have a notion of what they could probably do and what they may not be able to do. The reason is that most of these essentially competitive problems, which is what these are not done on one throw or two throws in life. You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of opportunities, thousands of data points that help you triangulate on your abilities relative to others. So it's unlikely that people have self-limiting beliefs, in other words, beliefs that are inaccurate and underestimating their potential reach. It is almost always the case, in fact, that people will overestimate their abilities. The system seems to be clearly the default of the system is the other direction. Now, so that is why they occur. They occur for various and sundry reasons of accidental patterns of, for example, failure feedback that may have taken place that appear to be compelling evidence that one is not capable of doing something that one is in fact capable of doing. So that their function, there isn't a function of self-limiting beliefs other than the fact that the system can only be, the system has to make judgments about what it thinks that you're capable of doing based on the available evidence. And so if the available evidence is in fact a strange pattern of evidence by chance, you get particularly negative feedback from influential people. So they tell you, well, you'll never be a writer, you know what I'm saying? And then it turns out, well, actually you have perfectly enough latent talent to do it. So that people can make mistakes, but there is the only, quote, function in self-limitingness is the fact that the system itself is limited in how open-minded it can be about data. And it can only question a pattern of negative data for so long to make the inference that maybe you aren't so capable, and therefore you accidentally set the bar too low for yourself, and then you could later on become quite surprised and pleasantly surprised, and maybe some angst about lost years or time or opportunity because it turned out that you had been better than you thought and you didn't know it. Now, completely different than the ego trap. The ego trap, what this person is referring to, is this is the name that I have given to an extraordinary process that takes place and undermines motivation, which is that if a person scans the evidence from the social world and makes the inference that other people actually believe in the individual's abilities at a higher level than they believe themselves. In other words, they themselves have internal inside dope on their own abilities, and they actually are thinking that they are not capable of X, whatever X is, but everybody else is. In that case, what they are designed to do is to avoid that challenge. So if everybody else, let's suppose you write a poem in the 8th grade and you get a big award for it, and then everybody else that thinks that you're going to be the next great poet. but you're pretty sure that this is bogus. Why? Because you've tried to write other poems and nothing seems that great. And you've showed a bunch of your poems to some people and they're like shrugging their shoulders. So just because we had one cool poem doesn't make you a great poet. And yet you might have gotten an award for it in the 8th grade. And so now the expectations from the social world are that you're particularly talented in this arena. So when there's a poetry contest, it's a very good idea for you to not enter it. And the reason for that is that if you enter it and lose, then you will potentially lose status. But if you don't enter it, then you have delayed the vetting of those abilities and therefore held on to your status as the great would-be poet for a little bit longer. So that is a different, quite a different look at what has some sort of superficial qualities to this, but they are quite different. All right, so that's that.
Interesting. Okay. So our next question comes from one of our listeners who's actually had a question answered before. Here's the question. My boyfriend and I are very nice people. We're very agreeable. It's almost like that joke of the Canadians where one holds the door open for the other, but the other one wants to give way as well. So they both die in front of the door. Well, that's us. Frustrating and funny at the same time, but we have a problem figuring out what we want since our first reaction is to please other people. But because we're not alone in the world, what happens a lot is that our decisions are made by others. Family members, friends, coworkers, bosses. And I have a problem with that. So I guess I'm more disagreeable than my boyfriend. I don't mind making him making the decisions. I probably wouldn't even mind him making the decisions 98% of the time. But I don't like other people making decisions for us, like planning our vacation time or what we do on the weekends. And it usually happens even after we've decided upon doing something. Someone just swoops in and suddenly we're doing something neither of us really wanted to do. Sometimes we complain about it, but we complain very quietly while we are, for example, painting that friend's apartment.
That's just great. Go ahead.
Luckily, we are not very social, which brings me to my second part. We're now trying to have a baby. And let me tell you, we are just too nice. There's simply so much written and said on how to raise a child and even what's best for pregnant women. I'm panicking even just by looking down this hole. Since we're both highly conscientious, I'm afraid of falling into the pattern of reading everything, talking to everyone, and then worrying about all the advice that doesn't go well together and trying to find the perfect solution. Your last show comforted me. If almost everything is in the genes, that I don't have to worry as much about bringing up a small child. So my two questions are this. Do you have any special advice for first-time parents? For instance, I have to worry about pregnancy in the next 5 years first. And then number two, do you have any sort of suggestions for dealing with these relatives, friends, acquaintances for two agreeable parents like us? Because I'm sure everyone will try to butt in.
This is just fabulous. Okay. So first
this
of all,
is the lady, by the way, that you had offered a job to before because she's so conscientious. You could really get her resume.
Good for me.
Yeah,
highly agreeable, highly conscientious people. If they have any intelligence, this is what I call the sucker triad. That you got sucker written on your forehead, because if you could just get the person cornered for a minute and ask them to do something, they'll agree, and then once they agree, they're conscientious enough they won't flake out, and they got enough intelligence to get it done. So these people are they are just built to be exploited. So by bosses that are looking to rise in dominant hierarchies, and they need a sacrificial lamb to make sure that they get 80 hours a week out of them so that they can outperform the other VPs. So this is life for these people. Now, let's look at a few things. So I shot a video many years ago, and it's on my website. It's called Success Forces. And in Success Forces, I talk about this person, this type of personality, going up against people in the world and things that get in the way of your best interest. And one of the big things that I talk about is that today you live in what I call a fractured village, so that the main players that want to control the resources of village life and tell everybody what they should be doing, those people have to butt heads themselves as they say, no, Susie's coming with me to pick berries. No, she's actually going to be with me because she's going to be weaving, fishing nets. And those two people know who each other are, and they have a hierarchy between them, and one of them wins those discussions. So Susie doesn't have to pick flowers with one and then go in her overtime, go hustle along behind everybody after dark and do a bunch of weaving on the nets so that she pleases both people. We let the two potentates duke it out in the Stone Age, and therefore the nice people certainly get pushed around and ordered around, but they aren't necessarily working harder than everybody else. Whereas in the modern environment, they will be. So they will be volunteering at the church, and then they're going to be doing the PTA thing because nobody else wanted to do it, and then they're going to be getting a job, and then they're going to be organizing the birthday party for their sister. Like, there's just no end to it. Now, so this is the problem of the fractured village. So what we have to do is we have to use techniques such as what I call blame Big Louie. So we're going to have to learn how to say no to people, but assertiveness training, as has been taught in psychology, won't work. Personality, so you can't I think the title of one book was, Stand Up, Speak Up, Talk Back, or something like that. These people are never going to do this. But you can do things that are slick about getting out of problems, and that is that you can blame somebody else for why it is that you can't do what these people want you to do. So this is what I call blaming Big Louie. And there's creative ways to blame Big Louie, and I talk about that on Success Forces. So that's one thing. Now, let's talk about some other things. So let's talk about her issues with being a parent. First of all, yes, what your child turns into is overwhelmingly in the genetic code, and our job is some people have had some hard lives, and they'll look back on those lives and they'll also feel like part of their adulthood has been tainted possibly by opportunities that were shut in their teen years by some poor parenting decisions. This is all quite possible, but your job as a parent is really relatively simple, and that is, we have a kind, pleasant, supportive environment. The kids are fed decent food. They go to bed on time, then they go to school. And that's it. No worries. And whatever they get in school, they get in school. And if they get stuck and they're frustrated, we help them out. But we're not fretting over their grades. We're not going to worry about it because the genes are more or less what school is more or less a fitness indicator for how intelligent people are and how conscientious they are. And so you and I already know that a kid is X amount of intelligence and X amount of conscientiousness. So we could figure this out by the time they're about 6 years old real well and just skip the whole thing, and we'd be fine. So we certainly don't need to bluff it by pushing our children to look more intelligent than they are, or pushing them to make them look like they're more conscientious than they are. Because in the final analysis, when they're 45, this is all going to come out of the wash. So your answer as a parent is you're just trying to have a good time. Just trying to enjoy the process of parenting these little people and protecting them and having fun with them, etc. They're basically pets with your genes in them. Look at it that way. Now, so as far as everybody else is going to have to say about your parenting, the attitude, it's good to sometimes reverse people and confuse them with this technique, and that is that any advice that people are pushing on us, we just say, oh, you're probably right, and then we don't do anything. And then when they say, hey, but you're not doing anything about it, you say, you're probably right, but we're actually trying to screw it up and then see what happens. So we completely we signal to people in a very pleasant way that we're not interested in what they have to say. But we don't say it that way, and we don't argue with them. So we say, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, but I'm trying to mess it up just for entertainment and see what happens. And that's a confusing, frustrating thing for a busybody. But if we stay right there and essentially shrug our shoulders and smile and say, yeah, we're never arguing with them. We're going to just give them that same kind of a line like, yep, you're probably right. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be a disaster. Oh, well, that'll be kind of fun to just see what kind of a disaster comes up. And we'll learn something from the disaster. Oh, well.
Like the ultimate troll.
Yeah. So this is what we do. And we can be pleasant enough. But in that pleasantness, what we are signaling is we're signaling that all of their great alarms are not causing us any anxiety. And, folks, they shouldn't cause you any anxiety. The only thing I'd be worried about with small kids is I'd be worried about feeding them milk or milk proteins. That's the one thing that worries me the most because I'm worried about the potential association between milk proteins and autoimmune disease. After that, I couldn't care less. And I certainly couldn't care less about anything that's going on in school, their achievement level, whether or not they have any friends or anything else. So if they don't have any friends and they're an introvert, they don't like anybody, fine. There's nothing we're going to do to stop this. Okay? So, yes, it's overwhelmingly in the genes. So let it go, pet them, hug them, feed them, protect them, and don't sweat it. And if anybody gives you any advice, just smile, agree, and roll your eyes and forget it. All right. Good enough. That's what we needed to know about parenting.
I like
There's two things you need to worry about parenting. Two things. And this isn't until they're teenagers. You need to worry about pregnancy, and you need to worry about drug addiction. Those are the two things. So drug addiction does not play fair, and therefore it makes sense to carry a very heavy hand on these young little brains that don't know anything and have no idea. They could be very open to experience and agreeable and et cetera. And so as a result, they could walk themselves right into a hell of a mess. So the one thing you're going to do as parents is you're going to let them know, no deal, not in my house. If we get the slightest suspicion that you're sneaking around, we're going to drug test you, and then we're going to come after you like Count Dracula. Okay? That's how I would handle that, quite frankly. Pleasantly, but when we get some little rebellious 14-year-old, 15-year-old, I'm saying, hey, I don't care if you're truant. This isn't going to bother me. But if you show up with drugs in your system, I'm going to feel like it's a 5-alarm fire, and there's going to be major consequences. You're going to be at a place in Wyoming, doing a ropes course for about 6 months, and that's how we're going to handle that. So my attitude is pregnancy, and with pregnancy, you want to be educate your kids, be very warm and supportive, and let them know if that happens, I'm your best friend. We got to talk it out. So these are the two great crises that we have to deal with. Other than that, the genes are going to find their own way.
Fantastic. I was telling my dad the other day about your advice on how to deal with kids a few episodes back. Deal with kids who don't listen to you, like, for instance, cleaning your room. And the look on his eye was just like, oh, gosh, this is cool. Like, I wish I could have just said that to you when you were a kid.
Yeah.
All the shit you didn't want to do.
Sure, all the gloat therapy. Gloat therapy is the way to go on that. Yeah. All right.
Next email. Okay, so dear Dr. Lisle, found out about the podcast last week. I have a BA in psychology with an interest in evolutionary and biopsychology. My question is there any psychology that examines dictators, group compliance, and control through an evolutionary lens? Figures like Stalin, Hitler, Jim Jones, Charles Manson come to mind, to name a few. And how would something like the door-in-the-face technique be explained through evolutionary psychology?
Okay, so let's talk about the dictators, group compliance, control, etc. A few sessions back that the person hasn't gotten to, I explained the Milgram study in detail. And so I looked at the Milgram study through an evolutionary lens. And so that explained to us the behavior of followers in a situation where the leadership can be brutal. And so basically amoral. And so that comes about because there's obviously a circuit in the head that is able to judge the cost-benefit analysis on whether we should be following alpha or not. And so there's a very strong follow alpha circuit inside the heads of people that was beautifully discovered by Stanley Milgram. Incidentally, in the Milgram studies, which were the shock studies that were done in the early 1960s, where people thought that they were being ordered to shock somebody to death, and 65% of the people did it. Milgram then did a series of studies where he changed characteristics of the situation. One of them was to, I think, make the experimenter themselves a short, unimpressive-looking person. And I'm not saying that short would, in principle, make you unimpressive-looking, but they specifically chose somebody that would be very unimposing in a number of ways, versus having someone that was much more stately and grand. And so it turns out that there was a substantial difference, although even our unimposing person had 45% of the people shocking people to death. So, but the point is that clearly the circuit is there, but it's picking up variances in how much of a, quote, alpha this is, and that's influencing the amount of unthinking follower behavior. Now, so now we're going to look at the characteristics of the alpha. So this person is now saying, what about Stalin and Hitler and Manson and Jim Jones, et cetera? So if you look, all of these people are just phenomenally narcissistic. So this is what Hitler, people will talk about Hitler as being a madman or Hitler was a sociopath. No, these people are narcissists, and there's a difference. So a sociopath is extremely disagreeable and has low conscientiousness. Hitler was not low conscientiousness. He was, fastidious, organized.
Drop Dr. Lisle, so we are going to get him back on the line and then have him call in. I have him get back on the line, but we were talking about the Stalin, Hitler. So let's just wait just for a second for Dr. Lisle. So our next question after we answer this one is going to be about dog people and cat people. So we really want to answer a couple more questions, then we'll be done with the show in just a second. So let's give us just a second here. I really enjoyed this topic. Dr. Lisle and I have been talking about how to make this show more fun. And so far we've stumbled upon these really fun questions here and articles. So let's just 1 second here.
Hi, this is Dr. Doug Lisle. I'm not available right now, but if you'll leave me your name and phone number, I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Thank you.
See if I'm back.
Dr.
Am I
Lisle?
back?
Dr. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay,
Can
so
you hear
we're
me?
saying about Stalin.
Yes. So anyway, the point is that that what you're seeing there is a very bad combination that will obviously lead a bunch of followers over the cliff, which is narcissism. And what narcissism is effectively is extremely disagreeable personalities. And so, God forbid, a narcissist has some conscientiousness in them, and they have some intelligence. And if they have those characteristics, and God forbid, they're also outgoing enough that they can actually reach out and impact people and they're going out. Then they can get a following, and then that following can be big trouble. So I saw a movie, we've seen it a few years ago, and I saw it again the other night. I think it's called Conspiracy or The Conspiracy, and it's about the final solution in Nazi Germany. It's just beautifully done, and it's the story based on actual notes that in this meeting, that all these notes were supposed to have been destroyed, but one copy of these notes survived. So it's the transcripts acted out of the meeting with all these narcissistic nutcases in Nazi Germany, that it was the day that they were basically explaining to the group that they were going to execute the Jews in gas chambers. Now, it's not. This isn't like fun Friday night at the movies. But if you're interested, what I like about it is it's the fact that we are looking at the real transcripts. We're actually looking at the dialogue that took place in that room, and we can listen to how it is that these people are arguing their various perspectives. And one of the things that will come out in this, as you see it acted out, is it was well done by the actors, and it's obviously constrained by the dialogue that actually took place. What you're seeing is narcissism. You're seeing an extraordinary narcissism. A narcissist can be conscientious enough and have perfectly fine feelings towards the in-group, and they could love their children and so on and so forth. This is not going to be characteristic of a sociopath. But a narcissist that is a 95-5 trader can believe that the world is unbelievably unfair to their in-group, and that therefore the out-group deserves no consideration whatsoever. And that jumps out at you in watching this, and it's one heck of a history lesson. All right, so that's good enough for that. Let's go on to the next one.
All right, our next question is about dog and cat people. So, dear Dr. Lisle, in my circle of friends, it seems to me that those who identify as dog people are skewed on the disagreeable side of the bell curve, while cat people are heavily skewed on the agreeable side of the bell curve. Dogs tending to be on the agreeable side, so they love unconditionally, are probably best paired with the disagreeable person, whereas cats are well known for their disagreeable nature, and all of the dog people in my life can't understand why I put up with my cats. They shudder and squirm at the thought of sharing life with the ghastly, disagreeable cat. So I'm skewing on the very agreeable side of the spectrum and sometimes don't identify disagreeable people quickly enough. So is there any truth to what I'm saying about this cat and dog person comparison, or is it simply a gross generalization?
Actually, it's an interesting one, and I'm not sure the truth. I think the better, I don't think it's agreeable, disagreeable. I think it's a more introversion, extroversion. So I think there's a correlation coefficient that dog people are more extroverted and cat people are more introverted. I believe that that's true. But I being a cat person, completely agree with everything this person said. No, I actually. I'm
a dog person, by the way, too. So I was like,
I understand sort of it's a beautiful sort of a storyline, but I don't think that that's true. I think that the story is one of introversion, extroversion. That's what I think.
Okay.
Somebody can write to us and tell us whether or not I'm right about that. But that I believe I've read that sometime in the last couple of years. I think to the extent that there is, obviously, whether you have a dog or a cat, it's not a perfect score, but there looks to be a correlation there, and that correlation, it makes some sense to me that would might be true just in my eyeball estimate of people.
Fantastic.
All right.
We've got a caller on the line.
Okay.
We're gonna welcome a caller. Caller, what's your name? Welcome to the show.
Hey, my name's Jerry.
Jerry, welcome to the show. You're on with Nate and Dr. Lisle.
Hey, Nate and Dr. Lisle. I've seen that your martial arts title and if we were ever sparring, I would freaking break your kneecaps, bro. But what are you guys talking about on your martial arts subject here?
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, Jerry. None. I don't recall us talking about martial arts.
Oh, I guess we lost Jerry. There's something with the call. Oh well.
Yeah. Not sure. Jerry wandered into the wrong room at the mall. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Oh well.
All right.
All right, Dr. Lisle. I think
what
that's
else?
it for today.
Anything else? Okay. Sounds good. I know we've got a lot more questions.
We're going to wait till next week. It's
Yeah.
a long question, so we'll wait till next week to answer
Yes.
it.
Yeah, folks. Yeah, I saw a couple questions here as I was just reading through them tonight. It looks like some of them are pretty long and detailed, and so if you didn't get your questions answered tonight, we are working on them. We try to feather them in to where it is that it makes sense and fits.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Lisle, have a great night. Thank you, everybody, again, and we'll talk to you next week.